I don't want you to feel trapped here, he said, but I also don't want you running again while you're hurt. I don't know where else to go, Anna said. I thought I was safe for one night. I didn't think it would follow me this fast. Mark rubbed his face with his hands. Neither did I. The rest of the morning passed with nervous energy. Mark worked around the house, fixing small things that didn't really need fixing. Anna stayed close, helping when she could, but mostly resting. Around midday, something happened that changed everything. They heard a car, the sound of an engine coming down the long dirt road. It was a sound Mark knew well, because it almost never happened. Both of them froze. Mark looked at Anna. Her face went pale. That's them, she whispered. I know it. Don't panic, Mark said, though his own heart was racing. We don't know that. The engine sound grew closer, then stopped. A car had pulled up near the gate. Mark moved toward the window and peeked through the curtain. A dark car sat on the road. He could see at least one person inside. He felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Whoever it was, they hadn't come by accident. Mark's instincts kicked in. His ranch, his home, his responsibility. Stay here, he told Anna. Don't make a sound. He quietly moved toward the back room, where he kept tools and emergency supplies. His hands shook slightly as he reached for a knife he used for farm work. Not to harm, but to protect himself if things turned bad. His mind raced with worst-case thoughts. He returned to the main room, holding the knife low and out of sight. The sound of a car door opening echoed through the quiet. Then came footsteps, slow, heavy, purposeful. A knock came at the front door. It wasn't weak like Anna's had been. It was firm, confident, the kind of knock that expected an answer. Mark felt his body tense. His grip on the knife tightened.
I saved you, he said slowly, pointing to her wound and then to himself. I help people. You are safe here. She cocked her head, not fully understanding, but her eyes searched his face, looking for honesty, for reason, for truth. It was a silent challenge, one that tested not only his skill and intent but also his character. She moved closer, circling him slightly as if assessing whether he was a threat. He noticed the careful way she placed her feet, the alert tension in her shoulders, and the steadiness in her eyes. Though her body was recovering from injury, her mind was sharp, calculating, unafraid to confront danger or challenge authority. He realized that he could not rely on fear or submission to maintain control here. She would not accept either. She demanded honesty, clarity, and perhaps most importantly, respect. He gestured toward the supplies, then toward the fire, attempting to show her that he had been prepared to care for her, that his intentions were genuine. She watched carefully, then repeated a few words he could not understand, pointing to his satchel and his medical tools. It took him a moment, but he realized she wanted to know not just who he was, but what he could do for her beyond simple care. She wanted assurances that she would remain alive and capable, that her strength and independence would not be diminished. The surgeon slowly nodded, indicating understanding, and then began a deliberate demonstration. He showed her the contents of his satchel, pointing to bandages, salves, and other tools, using gestures to show their purpose. She watched intently, moving closer to examine each item, her fingers brushing lightly over the objects as if testing their meaning. He nodded with quiet admiration how quick and careful she was, how she absorbed information with a mind trained to survive in difficult circumstances. He had no modern anesthetic, no sophisticated equipment, only his skill, knowledge, and the natural remedies he carried. He applied a herbal mixture to the wound to reduce pain and infection, then stabilized the leg using a piece of sturdy wood he had fashioned into a splint. The first incision was the hardest. Elias's hands moved quickly but deliberately, recalling every detail of surgeries performed in hospitals long ago. The tissue around the fracture was damaged and bruised, requiring careful cleaning. He worked silently, only speaking occasionally to give reassurance. The woman's groans and quick breaths filled the air, mingling with the faint sound of the wind and the distant howl of a coyote. Every movement had to be precise. A slip could endanger her life. Hours passed slowly. Elias had to remove damaged tissue, align the bone properly, and control bleeding with limited resources. He improvised clamps from clean sticks, tied makeshift sutures, and used cloth strips to secure the splint. Sweat dripped down his forehead, mixing with the dust of the desert. His back ached, and his hands were cramped, but he did not pause. He knew the stakes, and he could not afford distraction. The villagers, who had begun the night skeptical, now assisted quietly. One held a lantern, another provided clean water, and a third offered blankets to keep the woman warm. Their cautious trust gave him strength. At one point, a sudden movement startled him. The young woman had flinched, causing a slight shift in her leg. Elias's heart jumped, but he held her gently, whispering words of comfort. "It's okay, stay still. You're doing well." He adjusted the instruments, realigned the bone, and continued. In moments like these, he thought about why he had left Boston and the mistakes that had haunted him. All the shame, the guilt, and the fear of judgment faded, replaced by a singular focus: saving this life. Time seemed to stretch. She had expected scrutiny, but the intensity of it, the sense that a single misstep could change everything, was almost unbearable. Tobin stood quietly beside her, calm but alert, his presence a quiet reassurance. Mara clung to it, knowing she could not face this trial alone. One of the elders, an older man with a deep, commanding voice, leaned forward. "We have heard many words from you, Mara," he said slowly. "But words alone cannot prove loyalty. Actions must follow and deeds must be clear. How can we be certain that you have not betrayed the tribe in secret?" She had lived openly among the tribe, working tirelessly alongside Tobin, respecting traditions, and helping neighbors when needed. How could she prove that her every action had been honest, her every decision guided by loyalty? She realized that no explanation would satisfy everyone. Suspicion had a life of its own, yet she knew she could not falter. She had come too far, and she could not allow fear to claim what she loved. "I have done nothing against the tribe," she said firmly, her voice echoing slightly in the council grounds. "Every action I take is guided by respect for this land, for its people, and for the traditions I now share with my husband. I have worked the ranch, cared for animals, and helped neighbors when they were in need. My life is open, my deeds are visible, and I stand here ready to answer any questions honestly." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in contemplation. "Yet reports say otherwise," he said. "They claim that you have met with outsiders who seek to profit from our land. Some say you have given them guidance on how to navigate these lands. Tell us, Mara, is there truth in these reports?" Mara's mind raced. She thought of every interaction she had had, every conversation with traders and travelers.
Thompson walked up to him with a smile. "Alex," he said, "you've done an excellent job. I can see how much you've learned and grown in just a few days. You've earned the right to call yourself part of the ranch." Alex felt a rush of pride and happiness. He realized that the work had transformed him, not just in skill, but in character. He had become more patient, attentive, responsible, and confident. As the afternoon wore on, Alex helped Mr. Thompson with some final tasks before the day ended. Together, they checked the animals one last time, ensured the irrigation system was running smoothly, and walked through the fields to admire the neat rows of young crops. Alex felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond mere completion of chores. He understood the deeper satisfaction of seeing effort, care, and persistence come together to create something meaningful. The ranch was alive, thriving because of careful attention and dedication, and he had played a part in that. Before leaving the fields, Alex and Mr. Thompson sat on the porch of the main house, sipping water and watching the sun slowly descend. Mr. Thompson shared stories of past seasons, explaining the challenges of drought, storms, and unexpected obstacles. Alex listened intently, appreciating the wisdom that came from years of experience. He realized that learning was a lifelong journey. Even though he had learned so much in a short time, there was always more to discover, more to understand, and more ways to grow. As evening fell, Alex helped with the final evening chores, checking the animals, tidying the barn, and organizing the tools. The ranch was calm, the air filled with the soft sounds of nature, the mooing of cows, the chirping of crickets, and the distant rustle of leaves. Standing in the quiet, Alex reflected on his journey. Just days ago, he had been unsure, hesitant, and inexperienced.
The night was long, but Elias kept working. He had to ensure the bone was properly aligned, that the wound was cleaned to prevent infection, and that the leg was stabilized for healing. Every movement was deliberate. He checked her pulse frequently, adjusted bandages, and monitored her breathing. Each small success, reduced bleeding, her weaker groans, her steadying pulse, was a victory. The villagers noticed, whispering to each other in relief as they watched the stranger work tirelessly, a man who risked everything to help someone not his own. Elias used a combination of traditional and improvised methods to manage pain. He instructed the woman to focus on breathing slowly while applying herbal compresses to reduce swelling. The wind from the desert cooled their sweat-covered skin and the lantern flickered, sometimes dimming almost to darkness. He pressed on, aware that daylight would soon arrive, but that the surgery could not pause. Nature had no mercy, and the woman's survival depended entirely on his skill and perseverance. The tension was palpable. The villagers were silent, their eyes wide, each heartbeat echoing the uncertainty of the moment. For Elias, the operation was more than just saving a leg. It was a test of everything he had learned, everything he had become. His past failures had brought him here, and this was his chance to prove that he could still save lives even when circumstances were impossible. Each careful movement reminded him why he had devoted his life to medicine. It was not about recognition, wealth, or fame, but about preserving life when all hope seemed lost. Hours turned into what felt like an eternity. Finally, after carefully cleaning, aligning, and stabilizing the leg, Elias completed the most critical part of the operation. He wrapped the leg tightly with cloth strips, secured the splint, and ensured that blood flow was not cut off. Nothing she had done had ever harmed the tribe, yet rumors had a way of twisting truth into suspicion. She forced herself to remain calm, taking a deep breath. "I have spoken with travelers only to learn about supplies or to trade what we need for survival," she said. "I have never shared secrets or offered guidance that would harm the tribe. My intentions have always been to support my home, my husband, and this community."
There was a murmur among the council members, some nodding slowly while others exchanged skeptical glances.
Mara could feel the eyes of the villagers pressing down on her, silent and expectant. She had to maintain her composure. Panic would only feed suspicion, and she knew that fear could make even the bravest person falter. As questioning continued, Mara realized the council was probing not just her actions, but her character. They asked about her honesty, her respect for elders, and her loyalty to Tobin. Each question, though seemingly simple, carried weight. One false answer, one hesitation, could tip the balance against her. Mara's hands clenched at her sides. She remembered the stories of outsiders who had faced the council. Some defended themselves well, some had faltered, and some never returned to their homes. Her mind flicked to Tobin. He had always been her partner in every sense, but here, in the council grounds, even he seemed powerless. Mara's fear intensified as she imagined the consequences if the council did not believe her. The thought of losing the ranch, the animals, and the life she had worked for pressed heavily on her chest. Her stomach churned, but she forced herself to breathe, to focus on the truth, and to remember that panic would only make things worse. Then one elder spoke, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We also hear that some villagers are concerned about your intentions. They say you are secretive, that you act without informing the community."
That small gesture meant more to her than he could know. It told her again that she was not being treated like something owned. She was being treated like a guest, like a person. Inside, the room was simple. A small table, a, a chair, a bed with clean sheets, a bowl of water, some basic food. Nothing extra, nothing to show off, just what a person needed to rest. She stood near the door, unsure what to do. Her body was tired, but her mind was still on alert. Years of hard life had taught her to always be ready for something to go wrong. The cowboy spoke gently. You can sit, you can eat, you can rest.
You're safe here. Safe.
The word felt strange in her ears. She had heard it before, but it had not always been true. Still, something in his voice made her want to believe him. She sat slowly on the chair. Her hands rested in her lap. The cowboy placed the food on the table and then stepped back. He did not watch her closely. He did not rush her. He gave her space, as if he understood that trust could not be forced. She picked up the food with shaking hands. The smell made her realize how hungry she truly was. She ate slowly at first, then a little faster. Each bite gave her body a small bit of strength. As she ate, her shoulders relaxed just a little. The cowboy sat on the other side of the room. Not too close, not too far. He looked tired, too. The day had been heavy for him as well, but he did not complain. He simply stayed, quiet and steady, like a strong tree that does not move easily in the wind. After some time, he spoke again. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, he said. But if you ever want to talk, I'll listen. Those words were simple, but they carried deep meaning. She had met many people who talked, very few who truly listened. She did not answer right away. She finished eating. She wiped her hands on a cloth. Her heart beat a little faster. This was a dangerous situation with many moving parts. One wrong move could change everything. As the voices outside continued, Mark knew one thing for sure. The truth about Anna's past was only starting to come out. And the horror he felt was not just fear of danger. It was the realization that he was now part of her story. There was no turning back. Mark stood frozen for a moment after hearing the voices outside. His heart was beating so fast that he could feel it in his ears. The knife in his hand suddenly felt heavier than before. He had picked it up to feel safe, but now it reminded him how serious the situation had become. Outside, the voices continued. They were low, tense, and angry. We can't just walk away, the first voice said. We were told she's here, and I'm telling you, this is wrong, the second voice replied. She's hurt. This isn't how this should be handled. Mark held his breath and listened. Anna stood behind him, shaking. She grabbed the back of a chair to keep herself steady. They're arguing, she whispered. That means they're not all the same. Mark nodded slowly. That small detail gave him a strange kind of hope. If there was disagreement, then maybe there was a chance to handle this without things getting worse. The knock came again, but this time it was softer. Sir, the first voice said through the door, trying to sound calm. We just want to talk. No one wants trouble. Mark felt anger rise in his chest. Trouble had already arrived. It was standing right outside his door. You brought the trouble here, Mark said firmly. This is my property. You need to leave. There was a pause. The air felt thick, like everyone was waiting to see who would move first. Then the second voice spoke again. Look, let's slow down. This man doesn't know us. We're not helping our case by pushing. Anna leaned closer to Mark. He sounds different. she whispered.
He noticed small signs, how she shifted when he moved too quickly, how her eyes tracked every sound outside the cabin, how her hands hovered near her injuries and tools. Every action was calculated, deliberate, and purposeful. She was a survivor, and her instincts were finely tuned. He realized that this confrontation early in the morning had been a lesson for both of them. She had tested him, asserting her presence and challenging his authority, and in doing so she had established herself as an equal in this small space. He in turn had responded with patience, care, and honesty, proving that he could be trusted and that his intentions were genuine. The encounter had shifted their relationship, setting the stage for cooperation, understanding, and the slow development of trust. Later that afternoon, the surgeon noticed her practicing small tasks with increasing confidence. She helped carry water from the stream, gathered firewood, and even attempted to sharpen a knife under his watchful eye. Each movement was careful and precise, demonstrating her growing strength and skill. He offered guidance only when necessary, allowing her to take control of her actions, recognizing that independence was vital to her sense of self. Evenings brought quiet moments of reflection. She would sit near the fire, watching the flames, and he would quietly tend to his supplies or prepare food. Occasionally, she would gesture or speak a word, and he would respond, testing their limited ability to communicate. These small interactions, though simple, carried weight. Each gesture, each nod, each shared moment of understanding helped build the fragile bridge between them. As night fell again, he could not help but think about the events of the morning. Her assertiveness, her demands for answers, and her refusal to be passive were all reminders of the strength and intelligence that had carried her through so many dangers. The woman was exhausted, her breathing slow and more even. Elias gently patted her shoulder and whispered, "You did it. You're safe now. We've made it through the worst." Relief washed over him, but he knew this was only the beginning. Healing would take days, and complications could still arise. The villagers now looked at Elias with something approaching respect and gratitude. They had watched him risk his own comfort and safety to save one of their own. One elder quietly handed him water. Another offered bread. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. They did not know his name, or where he had come from, or the life he had left behind. They only knew that he had saved a life when it mattered most. For Elias, this silent acknowledgement was more valuable than any reward or recognition he had ever received in Boston. Through the night, Elias continued to monitor the woman. He applied gentle compresses, ensured she remained hydrated, and encouraged her to breathe deeply. He also instructed the villagers in basic care, how to change the bandages carefully, how to move her safely. They listened attentively, understanding that the survival of one of their own depended on these careful actions. Elias realized that this was not just a surgery. It was teaching, sharing knowledge, and empowering a community to care for their own. As the first light of dawn touched the desert, the operation was complete. The immediate danger had passed. The woman's leg was stabilized, bleeding controlled, and she was alive. Elias allowed himself a brief moment to rest, leaning against a rock, feeling the exhaustion of the night settle into his bones. His hands were raw and sore, his back stiff, but he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had saved a life under conditions that would have challenged even the most experienced surgeons. "How do you respond?" Mara took another deep breath. She had always valued her independence, but independence did not mean secrecy. "I am open about my actions," she said. "I share my work and decisions with my husband and with anyone who needs to know. I have never acted against the tribe. My work on the ranch, my care for the animals, and my dedication to our land are visible for all to see." The murmurs continued. Mara noticed a few villagers shifting uneasily, unsure of whether to trust her words. The fear in the air was tangible, wrapping around her like a tight, suffocating blanket. She felt it pressing down on her chest, making each breath a struggle. Tobin squeezed her hand gently, reminding her that she was not alone. Hours seemed to pass as the council continued questioning. Mara's legs ached from standing, her throat dry, but she refused to show weakness. She remembered her life on the ranch, the storms she had weathered, the injuries she had endured, the long hours of work and determination. and drew strength from those memories. She had survived the harshest conditions the land could offer, and she could survive this moment too. But as the questioning stretched on, Mara could feel the threat of judgment closing in. She realized that the council was not only testing her honesty but also the patience of the villagers watching. Suspicion had a way of feeding itself, and she could sense that the whispers and doubts might soon turn into outright condemnation. The thought made her heart pound faster. One of the younger council members spoke now, a man with sharp eyes and a critical voice. "We have heard witnesses say that you sometimes leave the ranch without informing anyone. How can we know that you are truly loyal?" Mara's chest tightened further. Every step she had taken on the land had been guided by responsibility and care, yet here, in this moment, it was being twisted into suspicion.
By the time the article was published in the weekly paper, the entire town had read it. The story presented both sides fairly, highlighting the tension, the challenge, and the human element behind the dispute. Residents discussed the article with even greater intensity than the previous day. Some argued about property rights, some debated fairness and compromise, and some simply admired the resilience of both Tom and Molly. The newspaper coverage also brought new people into the conversation. A few farmers from neighboring towns called Tom and Molly to offer advice, share similar experiences, or simply express support. While some of these calls were helpful, others added more opinions to an already crowded discussion. Tom found the attention exhausting, while Molly felt a mix of excitement and pressure. She was proud that her story was being heard, but worried about how it might influence the town's perception of her in the long term. Amid all this attention, Tom began to reflect deeply on his own behavior. He thought about his reaction to Molly's question, the tension he had felt, and the pride that had made compromise so difficult. He remembered his own beginnings on the ranch, the lessons he had learned from his father, and the challenges he had faced as a young farmer. Slowly, he realized that his anger had been fueled not by any malice from Molly, but by fear. Fear of losing control, of seeing his hard work changed without his input, and of being misunderstood by the community he cared about. Molly, meanwhile, reflected on her own approach. She realized that persistence alone wasn't always enough. Understanding the other person's perspective was just as important. She recognized that Tom's resistance came from decades of experience, pride, and attachment to the land, and that patience and empathy would be key to resolving the issue. The community also played a subtle but important role. The sun continued to rise over the town of Redridge, casting a warm light over the streets and the small figures walking away from a moment that would never be forgotten. Even as they left the square, Martha knew the events of the day would stay with her forever. She had witnessed cruelty, fear, and indifference, but she had also seen courage, compassion, and humanity. And most importantly, she had discovered that one person standing up for what is right can change the course of many lives. Red Lawson, the wandering cowboy, had shown her that even in the darkest times, hope and courage could prevail. After the auction ended, the square remained tense. Martha clutched Samuel tightly, her heart still racing from the fear and uncertainty she had faced. The crowd had begun to disperse, but whispers lingered in the air. People were talking about the bold cowboy, Red Lawson, who had stepped in and prevented the unimaginable. Some admired his courage, others frowned at his interference, and a few questioned what had really just happened. Martha hardly noticed any of it. All she could feel was relief and gratitude for the man who had protected her and her child. Red stayed close, guiding her away from the auction block and the curious onlookers. His calm presence was comforting. He did not speak loudly, did not announce that he had saved the day, but his steady gaze and quiet determination said more than words ever could. "Come on," he said softly. "We need to get you somewhere safe. This isn't over yet." Martha nodded, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. Her legs were weak, her body trembling, but Samuel in her arms gave her strength. She knew she had to keep moving forward, for him, for herself. They walked toward the edge of the town where the streets were quieter, away from the harsh eyes of people who might not understand mercy.